Okay, so basically, we're just gonna chat.
Mhm.
It's not like usually we have strategy sessions or like case study sessions, and I feel like this is just neither. I mean, we can get into strategy, but I kind of just want to have like a candid conversation about like your branding, your style, like how you like to think about things because I
Mhm.
feel like you think about things totally out of the box when it comes to like your brand. And I've always really admired it, even before we knew each other. When I was just
Mhm.
following you, I'm like, that girl has such a cool brand. And it's like everything's on theme and everything is just like everything comes together. So I would love to know, like, we can just start right now. I would love to
Yeah.
know where that all came from, first of all, or like, did you have a passion for that?
Well, I'm married to a videographer, so that's probably a big part of it. So, I think I've always been a really creative person, but he helps me like take these concepts from my head and like bring them into life. But also, I think just, I've been in this industry for almost 5 years now, and it can be a lot of the same over and over and over again. And so, almost anytime I do something in business, I'm trying to think like the opposite of how I think my peers would think about it. Um, and I also take a lot of inspiration from like big corporations and the way that they do their marketing and kind of like translate it into my brand versus taking inspiration from the people around me. If that makes sense. But are you asking about the hotline specifically or just in general?
It's in general. Like,
Yeah.
we'll get into the hotline because I think that was just like absolutely genius. And I would love to know how you strategize that. But can you first walk us through what you do so people can get a sense of how you're kind of disrupting in your branding in your space?
Yeah, so I am a team operations and leadership coach and consultant. So I basically help small business owners create really good strategy around how they manage their team, how they hire people into their team, and then streamlining the operations of the day to day once they kind of have that team on board. I kind of work with people of all industries. There's really not an industry that I haven't touched. And yeah, I kind of got my start as the district manager in corporate retail, learned a lot about managing really high sales volume operations. I managed 5 stores, I did 6 full store remodels. The store managers was managing were twice my age. And then each of the stores had teams of about 15 to 20. So across my entire district, I had almost 100 employees that I was managing. And I just learned a lot about how transferable that would be to small business owners who a lot of times our knowledge kind of stops at the team building part. So that's, kind of where I step in. And I got started with doing like VIP days and 1 day sessions. But then Grindaholics Anonymous was born. That's kind of like the core foundation of my brand. And the inspiration behind that was just thinking about the problems that my ideal clients were having. And the main one was that they work a lot, right? They think that I'm a business owner, I have to bootstrap this thing, I have to put in hundreds of hours, and so initially I came up with Workaholics Anonymous, but that's actually a real thing that already exists. It was already trademarked. So then we, pivoted to Grindaholics Anonymous. And it really kind of birthed this brand based around the concept of rehab and recovery. And from that, so many other things were able to kind of flow. So the Grindaholics Anonymous started as a 6 month coaching program, and we kind of followed like 7 steps. That was the framework. So it was like our 7 step system. And then once I decided to close that program, I turned it into Grindaholics RX with kind of like a pharmacy feel towards it. My 90-minute intensive is called Personnel Prescription. So all of the things kind of go together, like you were saying. But it makes it fun and it makes it really easy, honestly, to come up with new ideas because I'm just continuing to branch off of this rehab medicinal type of, theme.
Yeah, and I think that is what makes what made me essentially drawn to the brand because it was so cohesive in this way.
Mhm.
And obviously, like I've hired you before to help our backend team as we scaled. Like you're good at what you do, but I want to just highlight the fact that the branding on this has just been spectacular. So take us back to like when you were looking up trademarks, like what did that look like? Like, did you just get the idea to be like, I want this to kind of go off of like a, anonymous program and like where did this idea spark? Do you remember where or when that happened?
Yeah. So I kind of have the same process anytime I come up with an idea. And so I literally just take a blank piece of paper and I start brain dumping words, phrases, thoughts, feelings around this concept. And so when I was trying to name Grindaholics Anonymous, I was listing out different characteristics of my ideal client, fears that they have, goals that they have, things that they want. And then I just really, I wish I had a more formal process, but I really just look at this brain dump and I try to start like making sense of it. And I think in looking at it, a common theme that I noticed was yes, people want to work less. Yes, people want to hire help so that they can have more support. But at the core, I think it's a mindset issue of not wanting to relinquish control and this addiction essentially to working. It's the way that we're always on our phones or our laptops, or when we have a free moment, we want to work on our website or check our email. And then that's kind of when this like workaholic thing came to mind. And this is also right before the pandemic hit. And so kind of easing into the pandemic, we were hearing a lot about hustle culture, quote unquote, right? And so even that really helped me kind of come to this. So it was Workaholics Anonymous for a long time until I actually decided to look at, I wonder if this already exists. And it did. So I found it on like the trademark website or whatever. And then, I spent probably a week being bummed about that. And I was going to switch gears altogether and just go to, something basic like the scaling CEO. um, but somehow stumbled upon Grindaholics and it stuck. And, it's a long name. I feel like it's a mouthful, but it's catchy and people remember it. And when people think about me, they think about Grindaholics Anonymous. And that's something that's important to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what was like I guess the color, the logo, the
Mhm.
visual vision for it, because it did have a very specific tone to it.
Mhm.
You have like your signature orangey color that you use.
Mhm.
That is just like, I just remember anytime I saw that orange, I would just think of you. And I didn't know you at the time. I would just be like, oh yeah, that's that one girl who's doing, team stuff, I mean, that's like we could do a whole episode on like color theory, but like, was there any intentionality between that? Because it
Mhm.
looks very cohesive. And I'm backtracking to when you were first doing
Mhm.
Grindaholics. I obviously know that it looks a little different now.
Mhm. Yeah, so I will say the green and orange, there wasn't a whole lot of I guess theory behind that. Those were just the brand colors that I had chosen. They're both my favorite colors. And so I had already kind of put out my first really high quality website that I, had paid for. And it was, using that branding palette. And so when we decided to create Grindaholics Anonymous, I wanted to keep the same color palette, but completely different feel. And so I worked with a graphic designer who could actually draw the logo for me. She was really good at turning her sketches into, I don't know what you call that, like a vector file.
Yeah.
Um, so my only idea, I was like, you run with it, do what you want to do. But my only idea is I want it to be a round logo, and I want a girl sitting at a desk, overwhelmed. Like, just do with that what you will. And so what she came back with was incredible. I think I had essentially no edits minus like a couple small details with colors and whatnot. But it was a woman sitting at a desk. I believe she was writing. She had like a post-it note on her forehead. Her coffee was like spilling on her desk. In the back, it was just a lot of chaos. And that's like the imagery that I wanted, right? Like the business owner who's just overwhelmed and drowning in their own work. Um, yeah, and that was it. We ran with it shortly after, and turned it into that logo. Later, when we kind of rebranded the company, it became like a more black and white logo. But we kind of stuck with that same initial imagery the entire time.
I love it. And And to go into, yes, that's the logo, but then also like your brand imagery. It
Mhm.
was very, it was edgy, it was high end.
Mhm.
Was there, I'm sure there was a thought process behind that when you were kind of strategizing your visuals to go with this theme that you've created.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to show what the end result could be. And not the end result in terms of like, oh, I'm on the beach and I have all this money, but more so like when you look at my imagery on my website and just within my brand, I want you to feel calm, I want you to feel at ease. I want you to feel like this is like the next level of doing business. This is what life could look like if I leverage the power of a team, whether you're hiring for the first time or maybe you have a team but you don't know how to manage them the right way. So yeah, I wanted the imagery to kind of show like the after of what life could look like after. And even just thinking about some of the intentionality behind the details of our program, there was a milestone where once you make your first hire, we would celebrate you and you would get one of our branded sweatshirts that say been there, delegated that. And then once you take a minimum 5-day vacation, you would get a custom luggage tag with your initials or your company logo that you could put on your suitcase when you travel. And so, like, always just wanting to paint this picture of the after or, simply just getting past where you are now.
Oh my gosh. And there's so many brand experiences that I think the online industry and as a whole, no matter what subject you're teaching on or
Mhm.
servicing, there's this element of kind of putting brand experience on the wayside. And I
Mhm.
think your intentionality in that was like totally felt by
Mhm.
anyone who you served. It was so creative. And these mini projects, because you were so intentional, you had these little things that you could push out and like launch to people. Whenever
Mhm.
someone's like, I don't know, like I don't have anything to create in my business. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's so
Yeah.
many parts of your process that you can be so intentional when it comes to brand and
Mhm.
the visuals and how you create it that it can just be this beautiful world that you create.
Mhm.
So I also want to touch on a huge part of your brand, which was the copywriting and like your little sayings. Like,
Mhm.
been there, delegated that is genius. I mean, like, what in the world? But going into, because I had an inside peek of your coaching program
Mhm.
as we were working together. And your copy in the program is just so freaking good. Like, did you hire someone for that? Did you do that? Like,
Mhm.
how did you come up with these cute little names, like, for each of your modules?
Well, I did it. Yeah. I think I was a copywriter in my past life.
I think so too, because it's so good. Tell us your process on that, because there's so many people listening that might not have the funds to hire a copywriter, but like
Mhm.
copy is so important too for your brand,
Yeah.
obviously.
Well, I will say the current version of my website was my first time like really outsourcing copy 100%, and it felt good to kind of get it off my plate. But in years prior, so coming up with just different concepts, I think once the initial concept was created, it just becomes a little bit easier to branch off. I did work with a course creation company called Dream Pro, and they helped me with like pulling a lot of the concepts together. So we kind of collaborated in that way. And they were not copywriters, but because they were helping to like organize the curriculum, it was easy for them to kind of get insight into what I was trying to do and help me, pull it all together. But yeah, so I was really set on the framework being called the recover method, and I knew what my 7 steps were. So from there, it was just about making the framework fit into the acronym. So coming up with creative ways for something to start with R, something to start with E, but so that it would still fit, if that makes sense. Um,
What were some of those modules called, just so people can get a sense?
Yeah. So, for example, the E of recover, the first E is examine offers. And that part of our framework is where we go through and help you to like review your offers and make them more scalable from an operations perspective. The final R of the recover method was relapse avoidance, and that's the part of our framework where we're talking about, okay, now that you've done this, you've hired the team, you've trained them, you're leading them well, how do we make sure that you don't relapse? How do we make sure you don't fall back into your old habits of being a grindaholic? So yeah, that's kind of like how we pulled it together. But yeah.
I mean, it was so good. I'm like, how is this girl coming up with these things? It was so, it just like all of the pieces were coming together.
Mhm.
So you have Grindaholics. You obviously trademarked it, I hope.
Yes, absolutely.
Because it's genius. And then you went through a phase of kind of phasing out of this. Tell us about that journey and how you took that brand and almost repackaged it, repurposed it, it felt like,
Mhm.
into not the same thing, but like you
Mhm.
played off of it a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah, so I had my son last January, and after he was born, I feel like everything really changed for me. And it's not that I didn't desire to be an entrepreneur anymore, because I did probably more than ever, but I wanted to do it in a way that just felt more simple. And Grindaholics Anonymous, the coaching program, kind of came to like a natural breaking point because it was an evergreen program, meaning people could enroll at any time, but we did get most of our volume through our launches. And so I basically had a class of people graduating right as I was going on maternity leave. My son ended up coming a month early, wasn't prepared for that at all. I had to cancel the launch that we were supposed to do to fill the program back up. So when I got back from,
Can we stay on that for a second? You
yeah,
had an evergreen program, but you launched it multiple times.
hmm
So can you explain that? Because I have so many people in our WorkPlay process who have evergreen programs
hmm
who launch on a quarterly basis. What does that look like?
yeah. So we pretty much did that exact thing. We launched, if not every quarter, like at least 3 times a year.
Okay.
And we would typically do that through a workshop or a like small conference, but I would be the only one teaching it. Like I would just have multiple sessions over 1 or 2 days.
Got it.
Um, Escape the Grind was like our signature event. It was like a 3 session conference. And then we would just do random workshops. Like I had one workshop where I was sharing how I plan my maternity leave. I had one workshop that we would host regularly called Fly on the Wall. That was really cool. Honestly, that was a concept I was really proud of. And it was basically where people could come into our team meeting and literally just watch us have our meeting. I wouldn't talk to the attendees at all. I would just be meeting with my team like normal. And then at the end, they would get to ask questions. And so they get to see like how an efficient team meeting runs. But yeah, towards the end of all these events, there was a call to action where people could enroll in the program for a discount of some sort. Throughout the entire duration of the program, it ranged from 8 to 10K. It just depends on like when you came in. But yeah, so we would do that. And then our goal would be to get, I would say like 8 to 10, 8 to 15 people at a time. And then in between, people could enroll at any time. And that typically would happen by people going through our funnel, referrals, people just kind of hearing about it through word of mouth. But I would say on an evergreen basis, we would probably only get a handful of people, like 1 to 2 people a month through.
Got it. I think that's really important to note because as WorkPlay members go through our process, they're making quarterly visuals. And if you're having these quarterly pushes, or at least like 3 times, like you're saying, you're
Mhm.
able to create new visuals for
Yeah.
those pushes. So I just wanted you to hone in on that because I think that's a really important strategy when you still have an evergreen.
Mhm.
I think sometimes people are like, oh, evergreen, it's hands off. I don't
Mhm.
I don't need to market this. It's just like
Yeah.
going on its own, but I love how intentional you were.
Mhm.
But carry on. You're phasing out after you
Mhm.
had your son of Grindaholics.
Yes. But first, I just want to say
Oh,
something.
yeah,
One
please.
thing I love about like the WorkPlay method is like the quarterly visuals, because that's something I feel like I severely lacked. Like I found myself feeling like I was using the same images over and over and over again for a full year. Like we really only did brand shoots like once a year. But I feel like that's something that really would have taken it to the next level, because personally, I got tired of doing the same thing over and over again. I got really bored of it, but I feel like having fresh visuals to go with the fresh campaign, like just breathes more life into the business. So I love that you guys do that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's like it's if you're pushing something out, especially if you have an evergreen thing, it's like you want to repackage the same thing. So how
Yeah.
do you do that? It's like you don't want to have to like grind it out to make a
Mhm.
whole new webinar. It's like you can just create new visuals or even just like a new headline for it, right?
Mhm.
And then it becomes a whole new thing, and you maybe touch someone who maybe last campaign it didn't really, grab onto, but like this
Mhm.
campaign, they're like, oh yes, like this is cool.
Yeah.
Like, you just have more opportunity to do that. And then of course,
Mhm.
it excites you a little bit more. But
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'll go back. So, so yeah, came back from maternity leave and basically realized like it makes sense to do this now. I could come back from maternity leave where I'm already only operating at like 50% and, push through and have a launch and fill the program back up. Or I could do what I feel like I need to do in this moment, which is close it. Because I didn't really have that desire to host the weekly coaching calls and audit homework and all of that the way that I used to. So that is when Grindaholics RX was born, which is kind of like the second iteration of my brand. And the concept behind that was the number one piece of feedback that I got from my program, from our most successful clients, was that they wish they could have came in and got what they needed and then left. And I did notice that the people on our website, the ones that are on our case studies, the ones that, went from working 40-hour weeks to 20-hour weeks, the ones that built a team of 5 people and yada, 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 those were the ones that came in and they were really showing up for 6 to 8 weeks. And then they kind of ghosted the program. And during that time, I thought, like, dang, what am I doing wrong? Like, why do people not want to come back anymore? But I just realized that when you're really serious about what you want, like, you get in and you get what you need and then you get out. And so with Grindaholics RX, the thought was, what if I just gave people the ability to get in and get out and get what they needed? So I took the 7 steps of our framework and I kind of combined them based on what made sense to group together. And we slightly redesigned the curriculum so that they could be done independently, because the way our initial framework works is each step is really dependent on the other, right? Like you can't move on to step 4 until you've done steps 1 through 3. So we redesigned it so that you could come in, if you needed KPIs for your team, you can purchase our Z-Pack product and create KPIs and be done. If you needed to plan your maternity leave, you could purchase Mom's Magic Pill and be done. If you needed to learn how to have tough conversations with your team or have better meetings, you could purchase Leadership Kit and be done. And so that was really the concept around it. So I did work with a copywriter on that. She's actually my friend, my old college roommate, Katie Pinnell. And she basically helped me to name the products in alignment with like medicines, kind of like a fun play on different medications. And our promise is that everything can be implemented in 48 hours or less. And so that's really the appeal to people now, is like, before I had to go through 6 months of Grindaholics Anonymous to get what I needed, but now I can knock it out in a weekend.
you know what this branding wise is reminding me of? Dry Bar. How they have like everything is based off of a bar, and like each of their products are named after like these
Mhm.
cute little things, and it makes you remember them. This your the whole idea of like, okay, you just get a prescription for one thing is
Mhm.
lands so well. The metaphor lands so well, I think, with
Mhm.
people. And the way that you transitioned out of it strategically is awesome. But from a branding perspective, I'm just like, oh my gosh, Tatiana has done it again. And I love that. I absolutely love that. So let's talk about your newest venture,
Yeah.
the newest launch that you did.
Mhm.
Walk us through the team hotline. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, it's the
The
Team Talk hotline.
team talk hotline, because
Yeah.
I saw you just tease this and I was like, what is she doing? What is she doing? She's on to the next thing, and I am here for it. I'm at the edge
Yeah.
of my seat.
Mhm.
And I think that type of anticipation, the way that you launched it, it created that because it was so it was so artistic. It was like art in marketing form.
Mhm.
And I want you to walk us through, first of all, what it is and then how you launched it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. That's a huge compliment. Okay, so the Team Talk Hotline is a free hotline for entrepreneurs or people leading people, as I like to say. And it's a free hotline where people can either call in and leave a message or they can write in and basically explain the team or leadership issue that they're currently having. And then I review it on the back end. And as long as you've given me enough context and it feels like relevant and it's actually like a team question, then I will record a response and post it on my Instagram feed for you and everyone else to see. You remain anonymous. I don't give away any private details that you share with me. And yeah, it's really just a way for people to get support in a free way. But then there's also a paid upgrade where you can do a priority call for $97 and you can get a private response delivered to your inbox. So if you want me to kind of get into the details a little bit more and you just want to feel like you're talking to me, directly.
Oh my God. First of all, the funnel, the strategy. This is a branding podcast, but oh my God, this is so smart, Tatiana. Where did this idea come from?
Okay, so this one I'm really proud of. So, again, I'm post baby now, coming up on a year postpartum, and thinking about my goals for 2024. And one thing I've noticed is that my audience hasn't grown like numbers wise. I've had the same amount of followers for quite a while, but also anytime I sell something, it's the same core group of about 300 people that buy from me. And so I started feeling like my audience is great, but I feel like I've tapped them out, right? Like it's time for me to grow my audience again, but I'm not just looking for numbers. Like I don't just want to hit 50,000 followers, but like I need to get buyers in my audience that are looking for exactly what I have, right? So that was one piece of it. The other piece was one of my goals this year as I kind of venture into working in more B2B opportunities and just again wanting to grow my audience. One of my goals was thought leadership. So in my head, I'm like, how can I like position myself to be a thought leader outside of podcast interviews, speaking engagements, and that kind of thing? And then the final piece was me already dreading creating content because I have been creating really good, high quality content for years. And I am getting a little like, I don't know, like tired of, constantly coming up with new concepts. So I was like, man, I wish I could just have people tell me what kind of content they want to hear. Like, how can I do that? Like, obviously, I could put a question box on my stories or like I can do polls with my email list. But like, how can I just get people to tell me what they want to hear? And that's when like the hotline came to me. It's like, what if people could just call me and tell me what they wanted to know? And then like I just put two and two together and was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to make a freaking hotline.
You know why it's so good is because it takes this trend of like the talking head video, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're flipping it on its head and you're saying, no, this is my way of doing it. It's strategic, it stands out, it's unique, and it's a branded thing. You're not just doing a trend or something that can grow your audience because in the same way everyone else is doing it, it's like you're disguising it behind the branding, behind the idea of this thing, and that's what makes it so good. It's creative, it's something different.
Yeah.
And I think that is so inspiring to see because we get I just did like a little thread post, Instagram's version of Twitter, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I am so tired of the talking head videos because it's like information overload and it's like
Yeah.
information I never even asked for, and I'm like, what is going on here? What I love about this concept is like you said, your people are telling you, you're actually giving value away, but you're doing it in a way where it expands the brand, which I am just like, yes. I think that you're actually going to start a trend with this, and I would not be surprised if other people start creating hotlines. I'm not
Yeah.
even kidding. Because this, I mean, you're the first person that I've seen do it
Mhm.
because it came from, your brain,
Mhm.
but I would not be surprised if people started doing this if you see it pop up.
And you know who else really inspired me with this too? Like radio shows,
Mhm.
specifically Dave Ramsey. I'm very neutral. I'm not like a fan. Also don't dislike him,
Yeah.
but I see his videos on TikTok all the time. And it's like these people, they call into the show and they're telling him, all their financial issues. And then he kind of talks through it. And then in the comments, like people are either loving it or they're hating it. But regardless, it's a conversation starter and people listen to the caller and they find like commonality with them. They find like common ground. And if they feel like they relate, then they're going to listen in. And one thing that was like mind blowing to me. So I don't know when this will air, but at this present moment, only 2 responses have been posted on my feed. And both the second one was almost 8 minutes long. And so many people are watching it and they're commenting and they're like, oh my gosh, this is happening to me too. Wow, this was so helpful. Like, I needed to hear this and I didn't even know it. And so it's like, it's also creating community at the same time that it's like, it's benefiting me, it's benefiting the caller, and it's benefiting my audience, like literally all at once.
It's like the perfect trifecta.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you got inspiration from a different industry, from a
Yeah.
different platform. Because even if you're sitting here thinking, like, oh, let me create a hotline like Tatiana did, it's not
Mhm.
going to land the same. You
Yeah.
have to take inspiration from where you're drawing it.
Right.
And other industries are great areas to do that because then it's never been done in your industry. And then you
Mm-hmm.
create something very unique.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just trying to like replicate what everyone else is doing, that's when it just
Mm-hmm.
becomes so stale, I think.
Actually, I was just gonna say, I had a team of interns up until like really last year. We had 4 to 5 interns at a time. Every semester, we would have a different group. And one of the tasks that I always had my interns do, and maybe your listeners can take this away, is one of them, their job was market research, but not market research like look at the online space. They had to go and pick different huge corporations, companies they liked, companies they'd never heard of, skim through their website and like examine their marketing strategies and then make note of them into a document, and then they would have to kind of ideate around how can we flip this and use it for us, or they would at least just like pass it back to us. And so the reason why I started doing that was I was really inspired by the way that Apple does their presentations when they present their new iPhone. And so we recorded our Grindaholics webinar to mimic the Apple webinar. So instead of me sitting at a computer on Zoom with my little, image head, whatever, in the corner, I literally did this really high quality presentation in a beautiful backdrop. And I was walking and talking. There were no slides. When there were slides, they popped up on the screen and like I was gone. It was just the slides up on the screen. It was brief and it was engaging. I'm literally walking back and forth the whole time. My husband had the camera set up like on a slider, so it wasn't just like, one still image. But that was really the start of me realizing like, I don't have to take my inspiration from the next team coach next to me, because if I do, I'm always one step behind. I'll never be ahead if I'm looking at everyone else around me. And so, yeah, that really became a part of my core thought process. Like, anytime I'm lacking inspiration or I need an idea, I'm looking at what Coca-Cola is doing. I'm looking at what Nike's doing. I'm looking at what some random consulting company in London is doing. Like, I'm not looking at, Susie, the business freedom coach, and no shade to Susie, but like, you know?
God, you're like speaking my language. I feel like this is why we're friends. Because it's such a key mindset. It's people don't understand why certain people rise to the top when it comes to brand, when it comes to awareness. It's because they're doing something that someone in that industry hasn't done. And
Mhm.
we have a ton of members have gone through our process. So I hear a lot about what people want and what they're trying to do. And let me tell you, like the most successful people are not looking at what everyone else in their industry are doing. They're
Yeah.
either looking inward, like what feels really fun to me, or they're taking inspiration from something completely different
Mm-hmm.
than what they're doing. And I
Yeah.
think those two things create a lot of at least branding success. Obviously, a lot of things have to go in place for the business to be successful. But at least from like a branding perspective, like getting
Mm-hmm.
people to latch onto your brand,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it stems from what we're talking about now.
Yeah.
I want you, I know we're running out of time, but I want you to just explain the launch of the Team Talk hotline because again, I was at the edge of my seat. It was so good. It was so different.
Mm-hmm.
So just walk us through like specifically what it entailed, but then I want to go into the actual visual of what you were doing because
Mm-hmm.
it was like so good.
Yeah, thank you. So I decided to not make it a big lead up, and that was strategic because there was no sell. So I know typically you want like a 2-3 week runway for like promo, warming up your audience. And I was just like, I don't think that's necessary because this is a completely free offer. And yes, there's the $97 upgrade, but like I'm really not promoting that right too much right now. So my birthday was March 6th. So I decided to start promo on the 6th. And then we launched literally a week later. So on the 6th, it was kind of like a fun, really quick teaser. And we honestly did more than my husband thought we should do. Initially, he was like, we need to keep these videos like 2-3 seconds max. Like they need to be like, what the heck? What's going on? But I decided I wanted to just give a little bit more. But yeah, so we spent the first, I would say, 4 videos of it just being like the phone ringing, me answering the phone, me talking on the phone, but not giving a single hint around what is it, who is it for, what does it do. But also, we record these videos in 4K. We have a beautiful, setup and scenery. The branding is 100% on. So it's still enticing, right? Like it stands out against everything else on your feed. Mind you, it's bright orange, right? So even the colors really stand out. And then as we got closer, we just started revealing more and more like tidbits, right? So, okay, support around your biggest team issues, call in anytime. And then on the actual launch day, I kind of compiled all the clips that we did, and I did about, I think it was like a 90-second voiceover explaining the process in full, explaining how you can call in. We even had a branded phone number. So it's 1-833 Team Talk. You can literally call this. It's a real phone number. But talk is TLK. So it's Team TLK with no A because, you run out of numbers. But yeah, so branded from head to toe. And then like when we finally released it, people were like, oh my gosh, Tatiana, like.
Yes. And like just to describe what this looks like, obviously it will have you in the show notes so everyone can go take a look and send in their questions. But you were in like an orange back. It was completely orange. You had like books, you had like a cute little retro phone. Like
Mhm.
you went into all in on the theme. Like you weren't just posting a stock image of an orange phone, right?
Mhm.
Or just a phone in general. Like you went all in on the artistic direction of what this looked like. And it was it I love that you say and like that your husband also said this, like it didn't have to be a whole big thing. It could just be something that is bam, sticks out,
Mhm.
has the right elements for on theme, and
Mhm.
you could use a lot from just that. It doesn't even, you're not even moving. You're just like
Yeah.
in this one scene.
Mhm.
And it's crazy the amount that you can get just from that one scene to
Mhm.
then take and use as your hotline visuals, and it was so good. People were like, oh my god, what's coming, what's coming.
Yeah.
You
And
had one where it's like it was just like you holding the phone and like the
mhm.
cord was moving. Like that's how simple
Yeah.
it can be.
Yep. Well, I actually can I get into like the thought
Please.
behind the design? Yeah. So, um, it was pretty easy. Like it really came together really quick because hotline, obviously, phone. So then my mind immediately went to like an old school rotary phone. And so it became very clear, okay, it's going to be orange, it's going to be a vintagey vibe, we're going to have a rotary phone. So I order a $40 rotary phone on Amazon. I order a $30 orange backdrop. We already had like the backdrop stand. It's literally set up in my house right now. It's just like a permanent part of my house now because I have to record the responses there too. Um, but yeah, so cost wise, extremely low. Like, the creativity is what really carries it. So then I went to Pinterest and I typed in hotline, I typed in old school phone, I typed in like pinup girl on phone. That's how I kind of came up with the big curler or rollers concept. So I was like, okay, we're gonna do one really like high class. I'm in an orange dress. I have my nails done. My hair is curled. I'm pretty and prissy, whatever. I'll be picking up the phone. And then I want to do one that's more comfortable. I'm in like more of like a pajama type shirt. I have my hair in rollers. I'm laying down, flipping through a magazine while I'm on the phone as if I'm talking to my girlfriends. Because again, I want people to feel comfortable sharing because you're literally telling me your business when you call into this hotline, anonymous or not. So it's like I want to create that comfortability, but I also just want the visuals to be like 10 out of 10. So that was kind of like how we came up with the two different looks, like a really nice, upscale, done up look, and then a more casual and pajama type look.
I love that because you're bridging the emotion of how you want people to feel with the visual.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily mean the literal version of comfortable, like you like laying in bed. It just means like an element is there. Like, you're in a more casual look, pajamas, your hair's curled up. Like these subtle elements, I think, are what make a campaign
Yeah.
stand out. Did you have any fear launching this? I feel like you're pretty good at like putting yourself out there though.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't think I really had any fear. I will say I was just hopeful that people would use it because it's one thing to love the branding, it's another thing to like actually use the service. But exactly what I thought would happen happened, and once one person did it, everyone else got more comfortable, and now I have like a queue of responses to get to. So yeah, I mean, I one thing is I think I've built this trust with my audience. Anyone who's bought from me or worked with me knows that like you're going to get quality. I know what I'm doing. I have a lot of experience. Like you can trust me. I feel like I've built a lot of trust with my audience. So I know that when I put something out, like they're going to go for it, but I also knew this was very different than anything else I'd ever done before. So of course there's a little like, oh, I hope they love it.
I love that.
But they did. So,
So, what's next for you? Like, what's next for Tatiana and the brand?
well, I definitely want to just continue pushing the hotline. You're definitely going to start to see me use the hotline as a strategic way to sell Grindaholics RX. So I have a question coming up that I have to record soon, and it's a girl asking a lot of questions about planning for maternity leave. We have a product in Grindaholics RX that's $197 that teaches you how to plan for a leave. So like naturally at the end of that video, I'm going to push that. I'll probably offer like a discount to people who watch that video, type maternity in the chat. I'll DM you the link with the discount code. So I really want to use the hotline to play that up. And I just want to be speaking on more stages. I feel like if someone can write in this extremely complex question and I can serve them with limited context, then I can speak on stages of 50, 500 people and serve them in the same way and same capacity. So you're going to see me everywhere. That's the goal. Like
I totally believe that. I feel like you just catapulted yourself. It's so fun watching a visionary, a founder just be in their groove. And I feel like that's what I'm watching you do.
Mhm.
And it's satisfying from an audience perspective to watch you just freaking kill it. So, where can everyone find you, connect with you, call into the hotline, all the things?
Yeah. So, first, I'm on Instagram all the time at _ Tatiana O'Hara. I'm also on Threads all the time at the same handle. And my website is tatianaohara.co. If you're interested in calling into the hotline, you have two options. You can call and it'll send you straight to like a branded voicemail. You don't have to talk to me directly. You can call 1-833-TEAM-TLK, Team Talk. Or if you don't want to call in, maybe you have a more complex issue, you want to give me some more context, you can write in at tatianaohara.co /Team Talk Hotline. All that's linked on my Instagram if you just want to find a clickable link. But yeah, and my DMs are always open if you have any thoughts, questions, comments. I'd love to chat with you. So
Thank you so much, Tatiana.
thank you for having me.